visible for me. Perfect. All right. Are we getting started? We'll get started. Let me start a timer, because if not, we won't get finished. That's the big thing. Let me start the right timer. Perfect. No. All right. Hello, and welcome to FHIR Subscriptions, Server-Driven Workflows. My name is Gino Canessa, and I will be your tour guide for the next 45 minutes or so. Agenda, just quickly what we'll cover. I have the obligatory About Me slide. We'll talk a little bit about why we need subscriptions, why we bothered making topic-based subscriptions. Do a quick technical overview. Again, we could probably spend a couple hours on this if you all wanted to. I don't think that's what anyone wants on Friday afternoon. We'll go through very briefly an example use case, look at a demo and the reference implementation, talk about some publication status, and hopefully still have time for questions. So about me, principal software engineer at Microsoft. I work in research in a group for healthcare standards and interoperability, on a very fun team that gets to come here and work on all these kinds of problems and try and help them make the world a little bit better. Been doing FHIR since 2019, which gets further and further away every time I give a presentation, and mostly focused on infrastructure, tooling, code gen, spec development, the management type stuff now. Was on DICOM for a couple of decades before that. We did CDs. You know, we heard about them in the last keynote as well. Same story. We thought we had 5 years before they got phased out, and I'm still getting myself CDs as well, and I don't have any computers that can read them. Well, I don't have any that turn on. Contact information there is at the bottom. So, why are we talking about subscriptions? Usually when we talk about FHIR, we're talking about REST. The RESTful API is really what FHIR is centered around. That's what we describe on the HTTP page. It's integral in FHIR as a protocol. And REST is, short for representational state transfer, and it's HTTP stuff. And we're generally aligned with it. I'm not going to say we're exactly aligned with it, but it's REST-ish. The key things are that it's client-driven, stateless, and cacheable. And this is great for scale. It's great for all kinds of things. But it does have a problem. It has a few problems. Everything does. But one that we care about. And that is the polling problem. As a client, you are the only person who can start something. And if you want to know that something happened, all you can do is ask. So if you want to know that there's a new prescription being issued as software on my phone has to wake up and ask the server, hey, are there any new prescriptions? And depending on how long I'm willing to tolerate having a prescription and not knowing about it, I might have to ask every day, or I might have to ask every hour. I don't know. Depends on the severity and all these other things. That's terrible. It's terrible for clients because you're wasting my battery on my phone. When I'm traveling in Europe, you're wasting my eSIM data. You are constantly asking the server questions that they're answering with no, nothing has happened. And we think a lot about the clients in that context, but the server answering that question to me isn't terrible. But answering it to 100,000 patients every hour, now that gets worse. And answering the same question about medications, about encounters, about procedures, about vaccinations, you can see it's actually pretty intense on the server as well. So, what we want, tell me when it changes. That's all we want. We want the server to tell the client when something happens. Problem solved. Thank you for attending my TED Talk. And no, I'm just kidding. So, this is more reality. I leave this in, and it gets smaller every time we have a new release of a specification. You don't actually have to read it, but it's important to highlight a few things. So we have FHIR all the way there at the beginning, and we said, everyone said, it was before my time, we do need subscriptions. So it was added in DS2.2, long time ago, ancient history in computer terms. And then people started looking at it and saying what was there wasn't quite what they needed. So a group of people split off and started working on FHIR Cast. And I like to highlight these things because these are all very closely related. And so FHIR Cast is really focused in on context information instead of content. And so the kind of empirical case I always use is a radiologist sitting at their workstation. You have a radiology viewer, you have an EMR, you have a dictation system, and you change patients. You really want all of them to change patients at the same time. So you want things that are real time, you want them on local machines, it's mostly focused on WebSockets and that kind of information. So if that's what you're looking for, use Firecast. There's also sort of CDS hooks, clinical decision support hooks. They really focused in on the use case of saying, I am a practitioner, I'm doing something in a workflow, and I need this closed loop. I need to notify someone that a physician is about to recommend a medication, and I need the clinical decision support to come back and tell me, while I'm still on the same screen, if that's a good idea or not. So that type of interaction, that it's something that goes out and comes back, and ideally still in the same UI, that's kind of the root case that CDS hooks was made from. And so while all those people were working on all those things, subscriptions just kind of sat there. It works very well for a few use cases, but there are limitations and whatever. And so in around 2019, and that was about when I started in this role, someone pushed the big red button and said, let's redesign subscriptions. We're going to redesign it for R5, which we know will release in, it was 2019, so we said FHIR R5, probably release in 2020, maybe 2021. It'll be perfect. That didn't happen. We had all those models ready for that, and then we said, nah, FHIR R5 is going to be a few more years. But we're going to make FHIR R4B. No. We did, so that's there, and so there are some changes and discrepancies, and then we resync those. People said, oh, no, we actually need it in 4.0.1, so then we wrote a backport IG. People are using that, so then we have changes in the IG that we have to bring forward into the models, and we have other changes in the spec models in the core that we have to bring back, and we keep synchronizing. So hopefully, by November, we have FHIR R6, and everything is cohesive and coherent and functionally equivalent between all of them. Uh-oh, wrong button, sorry. So, what are topic-based subscriptions? Well, if you're familiar with the internet, pub-sub pattern. Web-sub, pub-sub, whatever you want to call it. There's a publisher, a subscriber. Publisher advertises what they publish. Subscriber asks for things on that topic. Reusable across systems, right? We want canonical definitions. We want national level things. We want very focused use cases to define these topics and let people reuse them in a wide variety of situations. You can base them on resource changes, or you can use events. We're pretty flexible on all those things, and servers get to really optimize them, right? You don't have to worry about one of the issues before where things like chained queries that you're trying to do a change set on that are 100 things deep because you need to know about a new prescription that happened to a patient who has a condition and is inpatient and all these things. And it's a great thing to ask, but a server might not be able to optimize that. So now you say up front, the server can optimize it and decide if they're supporting it or not. And really we get back to server-driven workflows. So what do we have in topic-based subscriptions? Well, we have three really conceptual ideas. We have the topic itself. Like we said, we use that to define the data change or the event. We define what filters you can use. So like if we're talking about a patient admissions type thing, then you say, well, you probably want to filter that on patient ID. We don't want to say you can base it off your patient location and do geo lookups because we don't optimize that, but we do want to support patient ID so that you can get yours instead of everybody's. Then we have the subscription. The subscription is really the link between the topic and whoever's getting them. You set the actual filters, you have to describe what you're sending and how, so the protocols, the endpoints, the MIME types, the payload levels, all this kind of fun stuff, which generates notifications, which are telling someone that something happened. So in R5 and later, like we said, we have subscription topic resource, subscription resource, and the notifications are an additional type of bundle called subscription notification. And we have a subscription status resource that tells you everything. It's fantastic. And then we have the backport IG where we said, how badly do we have to squint to make any of these things available? Functionally, we can do it. So in R4B, we do have subscription topic and status. In R4, we don't, so we use basics. We use a profile on the subscription resource to make all the changes we need, and then we use parameters and stuff like that. One of the interesting things, we use a history bundle when we're sending them. There are some technical reasons that are interesting and would take a half hour on their own to go through, but suffice to say, there was a lot of discussion and a reason why we landed on history. So again, different views. I like slicing things up in different ways, slicing and reslicing, if you will. But that is the three parts: the topic, the subscription, and the notification. So yeah, we've already talked about some of these, and so I'll try to be cognizant of that in the slides. But the topics are canonical resources. I don't know how familiar people are or not, but we have kind of really two types of resources. We have domain resources, like a patient or an encounter or something like that. And we have these canonical or definitional or knowledge-based artifacts, which are not really patient things, but patient-adjacent things, usually, hopefully. Publish in implementation guides, go in the FHIR registry, define them, derive them, reference them, do all that kind of fun stuff. The key here is we have a bunch of ways of triggering notifications and describing what triggers them. The most important one, as with most healthcare, human-readable text. We want to make sure that when people implement them, they're implementing the same thing, because we want clients and servers to have the same expectations and make sure that it's the same. Some people will understand FHIR path, some people will understand query changes, some people will know event catalogs like ADT-AO1. Great, put all of those definitions in, but when push comes to shove, make sure you describe it very specifically and clearly what you're doing. As I said, we define the allowed filters and define the shape. And I like to highlight there that we have a big may. Resources that may be included with your notification, security, privacy, delineations between FHIR servers and systems and what's in your architecture. There are so many things that go into what you actually get at runtime. So we want to say, yes, when you give an encounter notification, completion, a discharge, or whatever you want to call it, we're going to hopefully include the practitioner and the diagnosis and the observations and all these different things. Great. Maybe you get them, maybe you don't. People need to know that those things can go either way. So some examples. We've talked about patient admission already. You might say this, hopefully you root it on the encounter resource. You want to look for a specific status, so an encounter that is in progress. Filter on the patient ID, filter on maybe the patient group, if you're using that kind of mechanism, things you want to include with it. Same thing, an explanation of benefit or an EOB. You want to do that on a create interaction because we don't have to worry about the status, we just want to know about new ones in this case. Might be filtering on the patient information, but we also might want to filter on facility or provider or payee or whatever else. This is just looking at what some of the properties and elements actually look like. Again, same thing, encounter, description. So you can see we have this FHIR path criteria. And in FHIR path, we define two variables, previous and current. Again, when we're looking at data changes, FHIR, because it is RESTful, you only have one thing in context. Because you are looking at an update on an encounter or an update on a patient or a delete on an observation, whatever it is, there is something there that's happening. And so you want to describe in FHIR path, you say, hey, previous was empty or the previous status was not in progress, and now there is a current status that is in progress. Again, you can say the same thing with query. So you can say previous, and you can see that's a query-ish string. There's a search parameter called status. So status using a modifier not in progress, and the status now is in progress. We also want to say we require both. We don't want arbitrary updates in encounters that just happen to be in progress. So you're changing locations a bunch of times, and you get a notification as a new admission for every single one. But we do want to say that when you're creating a new one, the test for previous passes automatically. So a computable way of describing kind of that weird interaction that happens. You can also say the same thing in terms of an event. So here we say in the same admission, we say, hey, here's an event trigger, and the event is an HL7v2 ADT AO1. For a lot of people, they understand that, and a lot of implementations just plug into that. I don't need to go and do FHIR path and everything else if I already have my HL7 message framework, and that's the thing I care about. And so we tried to make these things flexible to make sure that it's lowest burden possible on implementing them. Same thing here, just looking into the can filter by. So you're saying here, what can an actual subscription filter on? So it's great that we're triggering on every admission. Please don't send every admission to a single patient because that is a lot of different admissions for a lot of different patients. And so hopefully you're filtering by the patient ID before you send them. And then the shape. This is what we were talking about before. We have an encounter, we're starting as the root, and we probably want to include the patient, practitioner, service provider, accounts, location, all the fun stuff. So the subscription is the other type of resource we talked about, a domain resource, kind of a regular resource, what we all mean when we talk about a resource usually. And it's just linking topics and clients. You can manage them in band or out of band, so you can do a client managed or a server managed. This is a key point for a lot of people. You might have a server that says clients can write to the subscription endpoint in my FHIR server, and I can manage my subscription myself. Great. You might say this is an administrative function that someone in the hospital is going to do, and we want you to call and talk to someone, and we're going to manage it that way. Great. You might say we have a lot of this functionality already available via our portal, and so you just configure it via the portal, and we end up sending out subscription notifications. Great. Again, we want infrastructure that can be used in a wide variety of use cases, and hopefully then in implementation guides or at national level, you restrict those and codify what your choices are when you do them. Endpoint information is very important. So channel types, we'll get more into here in a minute. But the easy thing is like a URL. You need to know where you're sending it, right? Hopefully someone's getting these and they're getting them somewhere. MIME types, again, we have to pick because if you send the wrong MIME type, they're not gonna know what to do with it. Amount of data to set, and yes, I'm not just a patient, I am me as a patient. So again, focusing on the clients managed or in-band, server managed out of band. I apologize that there are two names. That is designed by committee. So as I said, we have lots of different publications that we're all working on concurrently, and it's the same committee, but one day decided we should call it client managed, and one day decided we should call it in-band. So it's, I believe in the backport IG, client managed, and in the R6 core, it is in-band. And same thing with server managed and out of band. So I filed another ticket so that we will reconcile them at some point here in the near future. But client's the receiver, asks for notifications, and clients is responsible for maintenance. So this is important. We generally can't prescribe reliable delivery, so in FHIR, and so someone has to check, hey, my SSL cert expired and I haven't gotten any notifications in a week, or whatever else is happening. So someone has to take responsibility for that. And for us, we said that's the same person who's managing the subscription. So if you're the client, it's your responsibility. If you're creating it, if you're the server and you're creating it, it's your responsibility. Someone has to be responsible for it. As another note, the server managed out of band doesn't mean it has to be that server. So a lot of times there's a third party, like a jurisdictional authority, who's saying, we need to send all of this type of referral, and I manage the people who are eligible to receive them. That's great. That authority can be managing the subscriptions that route to all of those places. But someone has to be able to pick up the phone. So what are the channel types? I mentioned briefly earlier. It's a method of communication. So we went through and predefined we try to follow the 80-20 rule and said, hey, we have REST hooks, we have WebSockets, we have email, and we have FHIR messaging, and that both is representative of common use cases and of a variety of different kind of types of protocols that you might be interested in. And that serves us very well because we made it extensible. So you can go define whatever you need to. Common things are saying, can we use a message queue of some sort? Yes, you can. You just have to define the channel type. Can we use our cloud provider of choice, Microsoft maybe, their internal protocol? Yes, you can. You just need to define what it means. And in one of my favorites is I defined a Zulip channel. So on my test server, I can send notifications to myself that come through as private messages in Zulip whenever there's a new admission on my server. It's fun. And when I put even facts on the bottom, I could say it tongue-in-cheek, but it was actually one of the very first customized channels we had, because someone who is at this conference, though I will not name, said, I need facts. And I wanted to strangle said person, but we did agree on how to do it and that it was possible. Along with that, we have payload types. So same type of thing. We have a lot of use cases and we want generic infrastructure, so we need to be able to say what we're sending. And I'll actually start at the bottom, and that's full resources. So you can think you're in an environment, business to business, you have agreements in place, or things that you're sending things through a bunch of chains and you're not gonna be able to get back to it. You say, send the resources. Send me the whole encounter, send me the whole patient. Hopefully we have this beautiful graph of resources that has everything in a tidy little bundle, and I never have to talk to you again. Everybody's happy. Perfect. Make sure you use a secure channel. Sometimes that's not appropriate. So you say, you know what, just tell me the IDs, right? Something happened on my encounter, tell me the encounter ID, and also, you know what, throw in the patient ID and throw in the observation IDs and everything else. But make me as a client go back and retrieve them. This has a couple of nice things. First is a lot less PHI. I won't say no PHI, but a lot less PHI. So risk on that side. And it's also when you're routing through third parties. So if you want to send a notification to a phone, you're going through some sort of service provider that is transferring that into a push notification. You may have written that yourself. You probably didn't. So you probably don't want to send PHI through that channel. The lightest one is ping. So we tell you nothing about what happened. We just tell you something happened. And then you as a client have to go and query to figure out what happened. This is really great when, yeah, I don't know, this might be over the open internet. Like, I have no idea where it's going, but I do need to communicate this fact that it happened, and that way there's almost no PHI. Again, depending on what your subscription is and topic is, if you put in the topic, you know, this is very sensitive information about, you know, mental health as your topic name, and you put that in your notification, well, I can't help you. So, again, reviewing, reslicing, pivoting the other direction. We have pings, ID-onlys, and full resources, and this kind of shows the additional workflow that you do. When you get a ping, you just say, I have a subscription ID, so then I have to go as a client, query the server, retrieve the data. When I have IDs, I get the IDs, so all I do is retrieve the data. I don't have to do any queries. Queries are expensive. And when I get full resource, I never have to talk to you again. I have everything I need when I got the notification. We've also added, and this is in, I believe it's all in the R6 content already, and it's in the Backport IG CI build, and we'll come to that in publication status here in a minute. But sometimes you want to notify and not send concrete IDs or resources. You want to send a query. So the common use cases we talk about there are like referrals. If I want to send you the medication list for a patient while I'm sending you a referral, if you're processing that tomorrow, that's pretty good. If you're processing it 6 months from now, because that's how referrals work nowadays, my medication list from 6 months ago isn't necessarily useful. So instead of sending the resources, send a query on how to get the current medication list. And that way, when you're processing it 6 months from now, you can come do that. Another one is when there's very complicated or non-standard areas. So insurance coverage queries in the US is our common example. But also things like sometimes data is encoded as an observation or a diagnostic report, or an observation or a questionnaire response, or an observation or a document reference, or an observation or a composition, or anyway. But in all those cases, instead of sending IDs and things like that and making clients figure out, and especially if you're trying to do empty with queries, they're going to have to query 15 resources to figure out what's actually changed, and instead you can say, nope, here is the query you have to run to get what's changed. Good. And also, I guess the last use case is that the data needs are conditional. So I might be sending a referral notification, and for a referral notification, I send 800 different discrete data type elements that I have to cover, but really this referral only need 3 of them. Well, I have to send all of them because that's my requirements, but on the other side, we want minimal data transfer, and instead they can choose to only pull the 3 that they care about. So it's good from privacy and everything else as well. So a couple examples. Again, our old reliable patient admission. We want REST hook. We specify a URL. It might be a relay that's converting that notification to something else, like a push notification to phone. Single patient. ID only to limit PHI. And FHIR JSON because we're not wrong. Same thing, we can do like a medication dispensed for a practitioner. We could do a WebSocket because this is working inside a hospital, like you have your little cart that you're walking around with in your hospital. You might be filtering on location because I care about things that are in my ward and I do not care about things that aren't. Full resource since it's all internal, but we're still going to use FHIR JSON because we still prefer being right. I'm just kidding on that anyway. You can use either, I guess. What the topic looks like, same type thing, break it down in the elements. We have a topic, we have a channel type, we have an endpoint, we have a content type, we have content levels, and we have filters. These are just the FHIR representations of those things. So the notifications, again, they're always bundles. The first thing in the bundle is the status information. So in R4B and later, we use the subscription status resource, and in R4, I won't say earlier because we haven't backported it further than R4, but we use a parameters resource. It was the best thing we could do to get that information. It must be entry 0. So there are very few places in the FHIR standard where we specify orders of resources and things like that, but bundles are one that commonly has it. There's a lot of different types of bundles that entry 0 is special. Compositions do the same thing, messages do the same thing, etc. And then there's payload. It's whatever you configured, may have more resources, may not, may have full resource content, may not. It's whatever's there. Quick side note on architectural things. We are trying to be as flexible as possible on infrastructure. Again, we want you all to be able to use this, both in the context of use cases and things, but also at the implementation level. So often, we think about things and talk about things as all-in-one, right? That first, it's a nice tidy box, easy to demo. You spin up one Docker image or one server, perfect. It's not real world in most cases. Typically, you don't have a single box that's your entire clinical data repository and portal server and database and everything else all in one. Sometimes you can. Great when you can, but we don't expect that to actually be the case. So sometimes you have a protocol relay. So you say, for instance, I can support all the subscriptions and I have all that stuff, but I'm only going to code REST hook into my internal or a message queue or whatever else. And I'm going to send it to something else I control that's going to go and actually translate that and go out to the internet and send it via whatever the client wants. Great. We can also talk about things like a logic server. There's another common one where you say, my server that's processing data, I don't want it to deal with evaluating triggers and doing all that stuff at all. I'm just going to send a change feed for everything that happens out of my server into another server. And that server will look at the change feed, evaluate topics I have, and figure out what to do to send and blah, blah, blah. And you can mix and match here. So you could have a logic server that's sending change notifications to something else that does the processing, that then sends it to a protocol relay to translate it to users. Great. Or any number of other things you can think of. These are just kind of 3 examples, but this is the kind of flexibility that we're trying to make sure exists. So with that, we can talk about, how do you actually use these things? We've talked about a lot of potential examples. One I like is care team notifications. This, to me, is a very personal use case, trying to figure out what care is or is not happening for a patient, right? In this situation today, as far as I know in most situations today, we're back to the polling problem, right? We have to figure out when something happened at another facility or didn't happen, but it's a lot worse because figuring out when something didn't happen is almost impossible, right? We're saying, when did you see this other patient? Well, I haven't yet. I don't know, are you seeing them tomorrow? Don't know, can't ask that. You have to ask again tomorrow and see if they came in. Perfect. Also, this isn't automatic. This is typically an actual practitioner that needs to go ask the question. So we're not just wasting battery and bandwidth on my phone, we're wasting time of people who are providing healthcare. They're sitting at their desk and saying, here's my list of patients. Did anything happen to this one? Did anything happen to this one? Did anything happen to this one? And they have to go and check that themselves. That's terrible. So often you say, well, I'm not going to check every patient every day. I see too many patients for that. I'll check them once a week, once a month. Depends on how busy you are. Depends on your care context. You might not be in a position to follow up if you're acute care, emergency services, things like that. You might still be interested in knowing that the next day your patient was readmitted to ICU. There is zero chance you're going to find out. So we want to facilitate these types of things. And I'll say for me, the personal side is my dad passed away now, but he had cancer, and on his third ER visit in 2 weeks, I finally went and found his primary oncologist. And I'm like, do you have any opinions on what's happening? And he said, what's happening? This was at the facility next door to the emergency room. They had no communication, no way of finding out, and he said he had not heard a single thing about any of his admittance to the hospital. And that was on his third ER visit. That's ridiculous. Things got changed, he got moved that day because they're like, he shouldn't even be there, he should be over here, et cetera, et cetera. So these are real world problems that are affecting patients. So how can we fix it? Well, again, we have to define things in use cases. This is the infrastructure layer. This is to make things happen. So we do need someone to go through and define topics. We need someone who understands the clinical domain, who understands what types of things are interesting, to understand what those event triggers are, to understand how they need to go, but define them. Patient needs service. Patient scheduled, completed, did not complete, canceled, new lab, new prescription. What's clinically relevant in this use case? Then we can hook it up, start setting up notifications. Again, there's one thing to send notifications, and another thing to receive them. Hopefully we can all build in these pieces so that people can get things in their work queues. We can get notifications attached to patient records. And in the worst case, we can always fall back and say, hey, practitioner, here's a smart app where you can get these notifications because they're not going to show up in your EMR. Perfect. Outcomes. We all win. Yay. Better care. That's really what we're going after here. Less chance of missing data, people knowing about patient events sooner, cross-organizational updates. Again, a lot of us work in little silos or bubbles, and it's hard to get data across those. Now think about when you're talking about organizations, across organizations, and many to many, because usually patients don't get care at 1 or 2 facilities. They get care at a lot of facilities. And you can't be asking everyone about everything all the time. Reduce burden and more information faster. We're going to do quick demos. So what I'm going to demo is reference implementation. It's available on GitHub. It's open source. It's just an in-memory FHIR server, has a UI. It's hosted. There's .NET tool, all kinds of fun stuff. I will make all of this a bit bigger. But if we go to subscriptions.argo.run. So this is just my reference server that I manage. You can see the nice warning at the top. This is for development, testing, and education. It is not for production. Please do not use it as such. Anyway, it has multiple endpoints, so it supports FHIR R4, R4B, and R5. This one's configured as reference implementation for subscriptions, so it has a bunch of extra information here. So in this case, it's talking about preloaded data, so we have a patient and a basic encounter. We have some additional UI pages and some endpoints where we can send notifications to see them. The quick tour is, you can come through here. We're talking about FHIR R4. In this case, you have to pick the topic here because we're doing a guided tour, and guided tours have to make decisions. So it says, hey, you want to use the only option you have, encounter complete? Yes, let's use that. We want to do REST hook. Again, we have a lot of things disabled because we're on the guided tour. Subscription endpoints, heartbeat frequency, MIME types, all these other fun things. The filter, we should use the only filter for the only patient that we know about in this case, and post the subscription. So now we can see And I'll do these in new tabs since I want to go back and forth. But we put a new resource here, and let's pretty print instead. And that's the resource we just posted. So throughout all the reference implementation, it's giving you hooks in to be able to see the different resources that are there, both the serialized content and nicer views at different points. In this case, it knows it got the handshake. So again, when we start with subscriptions, we say, here's a handshake so that we know the pipe was valid. Same type of thing. It posted a bundle. Again, we're in R4, so it's a history bundle. We can see that there's a parameters up front that's giving us information about the subscription and topic. It's telling us that it's active, and this was a handshake, so there have been 0 events. Pretty straightforward. We keep going and say, hey, let's trigger some notifications. We can trigger a bunch of them. And when we do that, we can go and see the same type of thing. We can see we're just posting encounters, so that if you want to trigger yourself and post them directly, you don't have to use any of this tooling to do any of this. We do that, and then we see, hey, the subscription has triggered 9 notifications. Let's look at what the sent notifications are, and we can look at what the received notifications are. So in this case, we're acting as both the sender and receiver, so it's a little weird. This is the generated events. And so we can see we're generating an event on this subscription from this topic. Here was event 1, event 2, so on and so forth. And we can go look at the actual details, the focuses, resources, all that kind of stuff. Same thing then, we have the received events. So this is saying on the other side, if you have your own subscription server you want to test, you can test sending to this server, or you can test this server sending into yours. And same thing, you can go through and look at the subscription, the topic, the local bundle, all these different things, so that if we want to, we can go see the bundle that's here and look at the actual contents of the bundle. And yes, I do support both JSON and XML renderings. So then we're done. That's the tour. So again, there's a lot more things you can do on the server here. If you need somewhere to play with subscriptions, it's there, it's free, it's there, available, hosted, all that kind of stuff. Links are in the slides. I'll say there's also the US Core HTI2 testing. So in this area, I don't have good documentation necessarily. Hopefully it's somewhat self-explanatory if you want to play. But this is for the current work we're working on for hopefully the regulation, or for what the process will go into US Core for using notifications, because it is a directive that's come down. So we won't spend too much time on that because that is still early. Maybe? Hey, all right. So that is reference implementation. So yeah, all the links are in the slides. Slides are in Whova. So publication status stuff. Oh, we're getting out of time, so I'm gonna kind of go through this. Notified pull in 1.1 or 1.2. Authorization hinting, so this is an open topic that we're always discussing, is we have 3 parties, how do we do authorization? This is a little bit more, we have to be careful. We want to say as much as we can, but no more than that, because we don't want to prohibit you from being able to adopt it because your country uses some authorization spec that's incompatible. Event tagging, so we collapsed all the different types of things for resource changes and events and all these different things, so that we can then refer to something that happened via a data change by its event tag, all kinds of fun stuff with that. Better cross-version extension support as soon as they're ready. That's the big thing holding everything up. We'll have new profiles, better definitions, and this is sitting in ballot reconciliation, so that way, essentially we're just waiting for the cross-version extensions, and then we can publish. FHIR R6, again, we've rolled up and reconciled all of the changes since we did the R5 models back several years ago at this point. Content freeze is in November. That's not too far away. So we need to have all of the content finalized. It will be normative. So again, if this is the kind of thing you're interested in, please, 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 I beg you, do a review, figure out, spend a day on a proof of concept, whatever it is you need to do to make sure that things work. Because if you want any sorts of changes that are going into R6, we have till November to make them. So you would have to submit them, we have to discuss about them, pay to argue, and then approve them, and then implement them. So it's not a ton of time, so please do go ahead and do that review. Anything that would have to be STU at that point, we'll have to figure out how to put in extensions or other things. Whole bunch of links. Again, I said they'd be in the deck, and I tried to deliver. So there's links to a bunch of decks. That is a OneDrive directory that has all of my decks since 2019 in FHIR, so all kinds of stuff categorized by event. We have a Zulip subscriptions stream. Please do go ahead and engage there, or just on implementers. We're there all the time. We have links to the backport IG itself, to R4, R4B, R5, and R6 versions of the resources, just because it made the slide too busy. I'm not sure if it's in R4B, at least in R5 and R6. There's also a subscriptions framework page in the spec that talks about a lot of the same content. And then the reference implementation, which has its own links to GitHub and everything else. So that I have not a lot of time, but questions, comments, concerns.
Monitor and left and right side.
Yes, left, right side, whatever.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Oops.
Thank you. Can you explain which resource you're using for the notified pull?
So the notified pull shows up in subscription status, just along with where we put the focus event versus related resources, or the focus resource and related resources and the event number information and everything else. We just put the queries in there as well. Because if you're sending a list of queries, you're sending a list of queries. We can't describe them much more than that. We could potentially add more Actually, I think in every query we send, we have both a coded information and the actual query itself. So there is that coded information hint that tells you about what that query is, especially in a case where you're trying to reduce the actual data you're retrieving. Yes, you do have a subscription. You had a subscription to start it. So the subscription is what's sending the notification, and it's telling you, hey, you should run this query. You might run the query today, you might run it 6 months from now, but it was still generated off an event like I wanted to start a referral workflow, or I needed to, I discharged a patient, or whatever that event was. The subscription is the one that started it. And we have to start from that because if not, we're starting from client things, and then you can just use the REST API. So if you just want to run queries. You don't need subscriptions at all. Does that make sense? No. Okay, we can continue it off after. So.
Hey, Gino, thanks.
Yes.
Small question.
Yeah.
Did you consider using a reference to an endpoint instead of the URL in the subscription?
We did. We have, and we are open to tickets if you think we should rediscuss it. When we first discussed it, it was back in 2019, where no one was using endpoint yet at all for anything anyway, and we didn't know what information we needed, and we were trying to figure out what parts went where, and so we didn't. But it is something that has come up a couple times this week already, and so I'm very open to looking at that again and talking about it in committee. So if you have, enough passion to say, hey, I think that would be good, then you can go file the JIRA ticket, and then we will discuss it.
I have a question too.
Of course.
If I wanted to implement this in R4, is it true that I have to implement it to make sure that I support everyone? Is it true that I have to support the backport IG and then the cross-version extensions that were coming out and will represent the R6 way of doing things?
Yes. So, sort of. So the way we did the backport was using the cross-version extensions. And at the time when we did the backport IG, we used the cross-version patterns that were defined in R4.
Yeah, we didn't really know what we were doing.
Yes. And so that's why we're sitting in ballot reconciliation, is because I don't want to publish another version with those patterns. I want to publish the next version with the concrete extensions. And then along with that, it's better for profiling. One of the problems with the patterns is the validators and everything just give up as soon as they see it because they don't know what's in there. And so the profiling was useless. So now once we have concrete extensions, then we can put in proper profiles on all these things. So
So we're hoping the backport IG just disappears a little bit.
no, there are still a couple of things. It'll be simpler, but the big things are in R4, the subscription itself, when we talk about like using criteria for change sets versus using subscription topics, we needed some things to indicate that. And so there's a few pieces like that that we still have to add even beyond just those. But it will be much reduced in actual content that's new in
So
it.
this is an update to the backport IG that will use the new cross-version extensions rather than the old cross-version extensions.
Exactly.
Okay, great.
Yep. Amongst
Yeah,
other things.
we're
Oh.
at time actually.
We're at time, so I will
I
hang out
need
here.
Nikolai, so
Yes,
no more questions.
Nikolai can be first. So, perfect. Well, I'll hang out here if there's anything else, and I'm here till tomorrow. So, yeah, thank you.